Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This morning's learning is sponsored by Jay Rogel and Debbie Rogel, in memory of Jay's father and Debbie's grandfather, Emil Rogel, whose yahrzeit is the 7th of Iyar. It should be a schus for his neshama. Thank you very much to Jay and Debbie. Beginning with chapter 21, verse 4. And maybe actually we'll begin with verse 1 just to give context. This is the mitzvah from the Torah for Kohanim not to allow themselves to become ritually impure through exposure to the dead. A very interesting mitzvah, which of course is still in effect today. That's the reason you'll see it at funerals. That a Kohen stands outside. So it says in the pasuk, "Vayomer Hashem el Moshe." Hashem said to Moshe, "Emor la Kohanim b'nei Aaron, say to the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron, v'yomar to alehem, say to them, l'nefesh lo yitama b'amav, that they should not allow themselves to become ritually impure for the sake of someone's death." Verse 2, Kim l'sheiro hakarove love, only to relatives that are close to him, which Rashi understands to be his wife. Sheiro literally means his flesh that's close to him. Limo, laviv, his mother, his father, v'livno, levito, lachiv, his son, his daughter, his sister. Verse 3, an interesting one as well. His virgin sister he may render himself impure for if she passes away, but not if she's not a virgin, not if she's married. Then, so this is the basic relations. Generally, though not 100% the same, but generally the same relations for whom a person would sit shiva if they passed away. Generally speaking, those are the same people for whom a Kohen should defile himself. Now the pasuk says, "Lo yitama bal ba'amav lehechalo." I'm just going to try to translate literally. It's a very confusing pasuk if you don't have an understanding of it in your mind. The husband or the master should not become impure among his nation to desecrate him. Okay, what did you learn from that pasuk? Who's the Baal? We're talking about the Kohen here. I mean, if we're just saying that the Kohen shouldn't become ritually impure, that was kind of the first pasuk. Why are we calling the Kohen the Baal anyway? A little bit difficult. Let's look at Rashi on pasuk Daled. Rashi on pasuk Daled, lo yitama Baal ba'amav lahechalo, lo yitama leishto psula shahu mechulal ba. A difficult pshat. Let's say he's married to a person who is halachically prohibited from being married to. There are specific restrictions for whom a Kohen may or may not marry. So the most famous one is the Kohen may not marry a divorcee. So let's say the Kohen is married to a divorcee. He may not render himself impure for that woman's funeral. So lo yitama bal ba'amav, as a husband, he may not render himself impure if it's lehechalo, if that marriage in the first place had defiled the sanctity. But it's a little bit of a jump in terms of what the meaning is versus what the literal meaning is. And Rashi says this is actually the straightforward meaning. There's another pshat that you could say that the husband should not allow himself to become impure if the wife, again, talking about this marriage which was invalid for him or inappropriate for him in the first place, if she's in the nation. What does that mean if she's in the nation? Sheyesh la kovrin she'ena meis mitzvah. If there's someone to take care of her, to bury her, then if he was halachically prohibited from marrying her in the first place, he should not involve himself with her burial. This is the famous idea, a fascinating idea, that even though there are all these restrictions on whom a Kohen may defile himself for the sake of their burial and funeral, again, his family, generally speaking, is okay. If it's a meis mitzvah, if there's someone, heaven forbid, there's just a person lying there and there's no one to take care of the needs of the person, then a Kohen should do it. Then it's a mitzvah for the Kohen to do it. So the pshat in according to Rashi, the pshat in Ba'amav is as long as there's someone else to take care of her, then he shouldn't deal with her burial and the like if it's lahechalo, if this marriage, this woman in the first place defiled his sanctity as a Kohen. But a complicated pasuk. Let's see what the Sforno says. Sforno pasuk dad lo yitama ba'al ba'amav lahechalo v'atam shelo yitama haKohen ki im lekrovavhu. The Sforno says this is not a halachic statement, not like Rashi. It says this is actually an explanation. The reason why we say he should not allow himself to become impure except for certain relatives, ki amnam haKohen hu baal ba'amav, because he's a master among his people. Not Baal as in a husband, Baal as in like a leader, maybe. A leader among his people, lahavin ulahoros, to understand things and to teach others. Ki sif says Kohen yishmeru das, the Torah yivakshumi piyu, the famous pasuk from Navi, that the lips of the Kohen guard wisdom, and they should ask for wisdom from his mouth. Now, is that to say that the Kohen is always the big scholar? Not necessarily, but you could say that it's sort of following the legacy of Aaron HaKohen. Most practically, it's because he doesn't have his own land in the first place. So if there are people, so here it is, he's spending part of the year in the spiritual pursuit of service in the Mishkan or the Beis HaMikdash, and he doesn't have his own land in the first place, and he's this distinguished descendant of a distinguished subset of Klal Yisrael. It makes sense that this person should be a scholar, a guide. The royal ish kazeh linog benesios. So since the Kohen, he has that type of role, it's appropriate that he conduct himself accordingly. Ki heichi de l'shtamad milas, that people will be inclined to listen to him. So the pshat is lo yitama baal ba'amav. This person is a leader among his nation, and that's why he shouldn't allow himself to become impure. People say, "Wow, the Kohen's not even allowed to come to a regular funeral. Oh, he must be special. It must be important." Heaven forbid for the Kohen to make that up for himself. That would be haughty and not caring, etc. But God sets the directive. Ve'ein roi sheyichalel hachanaso el mikdash v'kadashav k'tei l'chabed hamesim abilti krovim. And continues the Sforno, the pasuk now continues to say to desecrate him. So the Sforno says it's not desecrate. I mean, it is desecrate him. In other words, he has a holy task in the mikdash of the base, in the Mishkan of the Beis HaMikdash, and to defile himself in that way will be disrespectful to his holy task. Okay. Ka'amram zal sha'akfura v'hesped b'meis himiyakra the shachvi amnam nekrovim hitilitamiki kvodam hu kvodo. So the Sforno goes on. The Gemara says that dealing with a funeral is actually honor to the deceased. It's always an interesting question. You know, a person, heaven forbid, a person passes away, and the person has mourners. So it doesn't have to be either or, of course, but what's the primary honor? Is the primary honor of attending the funeral showing honor to the mourners, or is the primary honor of attending the funeral showing honor to the deceased? So the Gemara says it's primarily yakra d'shachri. It's primarily honor to the deceased. So therefore, essentially what the Kohen is doing, it's a very nice chesed for the rest of us to attend the funeral. What the Kohen is doing is essentially saying this deceased person is more important than his role. And that's disrespectful to his role. That's the idea. So then how do you understand why he's allowed to attend the funeral of close relatives? How does that work then? So he says, because there, by honoring his relatives, he's showing honor to himself. And in other words, and so that elevates his position. Interesting, but I always think it's interesting when you have the same pasuk that Mefarshim understand in such a different way from each other. Okay, let's go on now to verse 12. Verse 12. This is another pasuk like that. We're now talking about the Kohen Gadol. And the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, this is extremely difficult. Kohen Gadol is not allowed to go even for his close relatives' funerals. He stays. He has a very elevated role, and he has to be above all that other stuff. Very difficult. Interestingly, the Kohen Gadol also would defile himself for a mace mitzvah. If there's someone that there's no one to do it, the Kohen Gadol should do it. Okay, verse 12. Umin hamikdash lo yitzei. He should not leave the sanctuary of the Mishkan of the Beis Hamikdash. V'lo yichalel eis mikdash elokav. Again, let's translate it literally. And he will not desecrate the sanctuary of his God. Ki nezer shemen mishchas elokav alav ani Hashem. Because the crown of the oil of the anointment of his God is upon him. I am Hashem. So therefore, these are the rules. What's meant by the phrase, he will not desecrate? He should not desecrate. He will not desecrate the sanctuary. I get it. You said he shouldn't leave. He can't excuse himself for the family funeral. Fine. Understood. What's that next phrase? And he may not desecrate things. We get it. What's this about? So second Rashi on the pasuk, V'lo yichalel eis mikdash she'eino mechalo b'kach es avoda shehitilo akasu akoin hedut she'avad onan chilel. An interesting thing. Know that when he serves in the Beis Hamikdash, the Kohen Gadol, when he serves in the temple, when he's lost a loved one, his service does not render the sacrifice invalid. You might have thought that the service renders the sacrifice invalid. Why in the world would I think his service renders the sacrifice invalid? Well, guess what? That's the halacha by a regular Kohen. We know, unfortunately, we know the term onain. Onain is a close relative in the period between the passing and the funeral. And in a sense, it's the first day, the day of death, but that's a little more of a longer discussion. So Rashi says what the pasuk is intimating is the only person who's allowed to serve immediately after the passing of a close relative is the Kohen Gadol. And his service does not render the sacrifice that he's working with invalid, implying that any other Kohen who would try to do this immediately following the passing of the relative, it would actually render it invalid. That's how Rashi explains the pasuk. Sforno, second Sforno on the pasuk. V'lo yichalel eis mikdash elokav. Sheyare shu machshav yoser kavod hameis mikavod hamikdash v'hakodesh shenitna lo. So the Sforno says, we're not saying a halacha, don't worry, his service in the Beis Hamikdash won't render anything invalid. We're giving a reason, similar to how the Sforno understood our first pasuk as an explanation. This is also an explanation. Such a difficult thing. You got to tell the Kohen Gadol he can't go to his loved one's funeral. So the Sforno says the pasuk's explaining the reason. We don't want him to desecrate the sanctuary of God, because to attend the loved one's funeral is to say that he considers the honor of the deceased greater than the honor of his role. Now, for a regular Kohen, we make an exception for that. But the Kohen Gadol is living by a whole different standard. It's an interesting thing. Okay, so we discussed two psukim this morning, both a very difficult pasuk about the leader or the husband not making himself impure, just what even that means. We discussed Rashi and Sforno, and regarding the pasuk of the high priest that should not desecrate, will not desecrate. Also, we discussed two different pshatim with the Rashi and Sforno in that regard.